At 3 o'clock in the morning, trust me, there's a lot of people awake grieving. 88% of people feel lonely in their grief. The club of grieving people is the biggest club in the world. So chances are that you're not alone.
What would you recommend to them? What is a good starting point?
First thing is to learn about it.
Loneliless, a podcast to reconnect.
Hi, Leah.
Hi, Enya.
Today we're talking about loneliness and grief. I had the honor to talk to Bianca Neumann, who is the clinical director at Sue Ryder, a non-profit organization in the UK that support people who are either facing the end of their life or people who are grieving. And I think they're doing amazing work, and it was really a special conversation, and I'm very glad to share it today.
What was it that felt particularly moving or touching to you?
I mean, the topic, of course. I have, like all of us at some point, and like so many of us have also faced grief before. So I think that's a topic that was just very close to my heart, but also not only the topic, but the way that Bianca spoke about it was so warm and so heartfelt. And at the same time, she gave really practical tips. One thing that she said that I really liked was the club of grieving people is the biggest club in the world. Mm-hmm. Or we spoke about the fact that grief is invisible and you have no idea what people are going through or who might be grieving at the moment.
Yeah, a lot of things also stuck with me, and I agree that this was such a powerful and moving conversation. I realized that grief and loneliness have a lot in common, actually. Both are such universal experiences, while at the same time they're so little talked about and often even tabooed and stigmatized in society. And therefore it feels really important and powerful to create these spaces where we can talk openly about both. And Bianca definitely does that and advocates for not shying away from those topics.
Definitely.
That felt powerful.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, I mean, without further ado, hope you enjoy this conversation. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Bianca, you are an expert on grief and loneliness. Can you explain to us how those two things are related?
Okay, I think we're probably all experts in our grief and loneliness anyway. But how it relates particularly to grief is that when someone dies, or maybe we're experiencing a big change in our life that comes with loss, that grief then presents an absence of something. And often in that absence, we almost feel like we're going cold turkey on something that once was and that gave us something. So from a brain perspective, a connection with someone close to us, for example, would give us, a sense of security. We know how the world feels and looks when we get out of bed in the morning. It feels stable and nice, and that makes us feel good. We get oxytocin, so that's the love hormone that makes us feel wanted, needed, and belonging to someone. And that sense of feeling calm and secure. And when someone dies or we're going through big changes, often there's a disruption to that, and the world starts to feel unsafe. You can't really plan it. Everything just seems like you've been put on a strange planet. You don't speak the language. You don't have a map. It's all very upside down. So then people start to feel that sense of disconnect with the world, how things were or should be, and that can often make them feel lonely. And with grief specifically, people around us look out for clues that say, this person is grieving, go and help. And that's normally the stuff that we see on TV where people cry when someone dies or when they're grieving. And if you don't send that social signal to someone, people think you're all right. You look fine, you talk fine, you go to work, you get out of bed, you brushed your hair, you must be all right. And that often then reinforces that sense of disconnect and being different to how everyone else is, which then puts you in a very lonely place. And coming out of that requires a big effort because, people start to act strange around you. And we've done some research in the UK recently that showed that 88% of people feel lonely in their grief. And at the same time, over 40% of people say, well, they don't know how to help someone in grief or what to say to them. So having that dynamic means that as one person walks down the road grieving and saying, I'm lonely, but not looking lonely or appearing grieving, the other person is coming towards them thinking, I don't know what to say to this person. I know they're grieving, but I'm unsure. I don't want to make it worse. And they look fine. They're not crying. They're okay. I'm going to cross the road to avoid the conversation. So you start to have that real dilemma of miscommunication and missed opportunities.
So to put it very simply, when it comes to grief and loneliness, we can support the person who is grieving, and we can do that as a society, as someone who is close to them, and as the person themselves who can do something about it. So what are some strategies that you recommend to people who are grieving right now? What can they do on their own to find that map that you've talked about?
I think in society there's this real push of fixing and having to do something to jump in there. I've got the tools, let me help you. And I think with grief, it's very different to physical illness, for example, like a broken leg. In grief, there's a lot of processing that is healthy and necessary. So people have to experience that sense of loneliness and isolation to an extent because they are having to rebuild their life in many ways and find a sense of self again and reconnect with lost things like, their past, who they think they were, and bringing that back to the now. So sitting with that feeling is one thing, but then also people need to remember that grief hasn't got a certain look and a certain feel, and that can have many different faces and ways and times when it might come up. So it's almost like a commitment to stay connected with the grieving person, even when they seem fine or when you haven't been in touch for months, because people often feel bad about that, so they don't contact people even more so. So staying connected, making an effort, and when I mean effort, it's not just sending a little message that says, "Hey, do you want to do something?" But actually, then also being willing to tolerate what comes back. So if someone then does want to open up, to not shy away from the conversation and quickly patching it up and saying, "Oh, you'll be all right tomorrow," or you'll have another nice time, or let's have an ice cream. It's then being able to sit with that discomfort and not needing to fix.
I think in many cases people are also overwhelmed and they don't know how to act perfectly around a grieving person. So what would you say to them? So is it a thing of, as you said, just don't say, okay, let's get an ice cream and let's pretend to be super happy. But what can they do about feeling kind of weird with how they should act around a person grieving?
Yeah, people often, when I give training courses, they say, "Can you just give me some sentences? I can say some wisdoms," and I don't, because. So I often say this as an example: when you have a newborn baby and they cry and scream, they go blue with screaming, and you're the parent that has to figure out what's wrong with them because, hearing someone scream is really hard work and it's really hard to tolerate. So if you apply that to grief and a grieving person, you wouldn't say to a newborn screaming baby, right, what you're going through right now is something to do with your intestines and that there's a gas in there and it's making you uncomfortable. You wouldn't rationalize it. You wouldn't give it words because often our experiences in grief are bigger than the words that we have and the labels that we could give it. So just like with a baby, your job is to hold the distress and to show up and being present, so witnessing their discomfort and not shying away from it and being there even when it feels really hard inside to not act or do weird and wonderful things for them, but just kind of saying, how's it going? How are you? How's your grief? Do you want to talk about a memory of the person that has died or the thing that you've lost? And then allowing that conversation to take place, and not going, sorry, I've only got 5 minutes and I have to be somewhere, or, oh yeah, not guiding the conversation, but being led by the person with that story, with that feeling, and with their experiences.
And as you said, grief and loneliness both can feel incredibly overwhelming. And sometimes people who are grieving don't know where to start to seek help. What would you recommend to them? What is a good starting point to opening up to somebody and to seek help in their grief?
I think first of all is to remind people that grief is normal. It's a normal experience in human life, and it's something that you have to live with forever. But that it will change shape and intensity and the way that you're looking at it from different angles, like a picture. And that the picture will change over time too. So helping them to feel normalized with that experience. Then, grief and the club of grieving people is the biggest club in the world, right? More than people that own certain types of cars or, are part of a lunch club or a gym or something. It's the biggest club in the world. So chances are that you're not alone. There's someone nearby, maybe even in your life, who's grieving right now. And we don't really have that kind of tribal support anymore, where we can go to our elders to say, how did you do that? Because we don't work like that anymore. But there's people out there who are willing to share the experience with you. And then that again can help you feel normal. It can give you hope, and it can show you how other people are coping with it. So what they can do is thinking about, does this feel normal to me? Do I feel like I have quality of life and I'm not endangering myself or others at this moment in time, when we talk more about the mental health aspect of things? Offer them things like going to an online community if they feel particularly lonely at night. And for example, in the UK, we've got a really thriving grief online community with Sue Ryder, and people use that at 3 a.m. because someone will be up and doing the same thing. And encouraging them to think about what has helped you cope in the past with life stuff, big life things. What has helped you to help people find that connectiveness with their strengths and their sense of identity again. But making yourself available too, and to increase their grief literacy. So there's a lot of literature out there, information about what it means to grieve, what it looks like, what can be done. So a bit like understanding about when you have a cough or a health condition, first thing is to learn about it. And then that will give you power to make decisions about what might be the next best step for you.
Mm-hmm. We probably heard about this thing of like 4 stages or 5 stages of grief. Is that a thing, or is that something made up by Steven Spielberg?
It's the most detested thing probably in the sector. That was something that was meant to make grief sexy and understand and get people to make something safe-ish around it to help understand what people are going through. But it was never meant to be for grieving people. It was an observation of people who were dying, and a collection of stories and experiences that seemed to have a common thread going through. And then it was made into a theory by publicists and people wanting to make sense of this. Now, unfortunately, that's still a thing with many people, and across the globe, people are making a lot of money giving people therapy because they feel stuck in their grief and haven't made it to the acceptance stage. So people still feel like or think that there should be an end part to their grief that they're working towards, and then get really frustrated and feel like they're letting themselves down when they don't achieve that. We've come a long way since, and we're fighting really hard in the sector to get that right again, and to get people to understand that grief is forever. And other theories like the dual process model or continuing bonds that basically talks about that, we are fluctuating from being in deep grief to coping with our day, moving forward and through our life with grief in it, and finding rather than having those big ups and downs, maybe a sort of slightly more up and down, getting used to the waves that are coming with grief, and more importantly, to continue the relationship with the person that has died, or our way of relating to the person that has died, rather than having that pressure to cut them off from our life in order to move on. So it's that there are a lot of preconceived biases and ideas that mean that people feel their grief isn't normal because of this.
Yeah, I was going to ask if there is another misconception about grief that you're tired of hearing about.
I think it's just some phrases that people sometimes still use. You get over it, the year's over, and then you feel better, or get yourself a new husband. You're still young. I think it's more those kinds of things that people say, trying to be helpful and saying that one thing that will get them to go, phew, I've done some good advice stuff here today. Less is more. It's the showing up, the example of the baby, and also just doing normal activities with people that they used to do before they experienced bereavement, rather than reinforcing what people are already feeling is a strange new way of living and a new normal by treating them accordingly, strangely and new.
So you've said that it's also important to not try to cut that person out of your life and to still keep it. And what are strategies or what are little things that we can do to keep that person in our lives, even when they're not with us anymore?
Yeah, they're all really personal ones, and they're also culture specific. So in some religions and cultures, there's also a certain set of rules around how you continue this bond. So it's really important to follow them if that's part of your community treasure and knowledge, and find out more about it. And same for the support of someone who's grieving. But, there's lots of different ways you can keep someone close. And we know that the same parts in our brain fire up when we look at the picture of someone, even when they're dead, than it would be if we were to hug them, for example. It's a similar thing with plants and trees. They calm us when we look at them on a picture. So there's something rooted in our brains that help us to stay connected and fire up a sense of belonging. So, for example, if you think of a time when you had a really tough time or a really tough day, and all you wanted was a cuddle from someone, and you, when you think about it, you can probably remember that sense of just your shoulders dropping and just feeling there and held. And we can create that in our minds. So looking at photos, listening to their voice on an old voicemail, or watching a video, smelling their pillow, or putting on their jumper or something, all of those things, all of those memories can reconnect us with that person that has died and help us to continue that bond with them.
Mm-hmm. I really like that it goes so against like what movies and films tell us about, like moving on and moving to a new life, meeting a new husband, whatever. So you've spoken about the community at Sue Ryder. What I didn't really catch, what did you mean by, somebody will be online in the morning? Can you reach out? How does that platform work?
Yeah, it's you go on a website and there's a platform where people will post things to different topics. For example, um, still missing him, or am I still a mum even though I've lost my daughter, or widow in need of a conversation. So people are making that community theirs. They are creating the topics. There's also a general kind of topic, grief. And then people will post to the one that they feel most affiliated with or start a new topic. And then they engage in conversation. So someone will say something, and at 3 o'clock in the morning, trust me, there's a lot of people awake grieving and not knowing who to talk to because, social etiquette, we don't call people at night unless it's an emergency. So they're reaching out to strangers to connect, to feel understood, and to not feel lonely at night. Post something and then get something back, even in private messages if they choose to talk further. But also some people just need to read about other people's experiences, knowing that they're not alone. So there's dialogue, but there's also a monologue that turns into an internal dialogue.
Amazing. I think it's amazing work that you do. So you've already explained what people can do in their grief. So a thing that some people also do when they can't sleep at night is listen to podcasts. So maybe somebody is listening right now who is in a grieving situation. What are some things that this person can do at this moment to find a little bit of self-soothing?
Well, there are lots of different ways of self-soothe. And that's probably the first thing is it doesn't have to be a spa day or something like that. It can be really easy. And it can be anything from, do you need to have a blanket on you to feel held and comforted? Do you need to talk to someone? Who's the person in your life that you could reach out to just say, I'm having a really tough time? Listening to podcasts because they have a lot of tips and tricks and helps you feel like you're not the only one on the planet feeling like this. Then thinking back, when you were 20 years, 30 years younger as a child, what did you used to do for fun? What fun stuff did you do? What does playing look like? Is that something that you can do? Because we know that will give us happy hormones and a sense of achievement, right? So that kind of thing, and we know exercise also helps people to feel like having a higher sense of mental health and stability and resilience. Eating well, it's often not talked about. It's very important. If you don't have energy to grieve and the right stuff going in, how can you spend energy grieving? And then thinking about what do you want to do with your map, with your life map? How can you find meaning again? And that's a big question that only those people can answer, and doing a lot of trial and error, testing things, trying things. How did that feel? Oh, actually, that was a bit much for me. I'm not going to try that again for a while. Going out with people, starting to pick up life, even in little chunks, and just then reflecting, what was that like? And not feeling bad about smiling and laughing. Because often people do, and they feel like they shouldn't. Even hours, days, weeks after someone has died, you're totally allowed to feel okay. Grief doesn't have to sit with you 100% of your day. And I think society has got a lot to answer for, because they then think, you sound okay, you look okay. Should you be sounding okay? Should you be looking okay? Should you be coming back to work? So it's, find your own way. Feel supported by others, reach out and tell people also when you need them to be there and show up.
Thank you so much, not only for this interview, but for your amazing work. It was a pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you again to Bianca for this amazing interview. I really enjoyed it. I hope you enjoyed this episode. And if you are
grieving at this time, or you know somebody who's grieving, we put more resources and also the links to Sue Ryder in the info box.
I'm Leah.
My name is Enya, and
This is Loneliless.
this is Loneliless.
Loneliless, a podcast to reconnect.